reports spread of food riots, shortages, people hurting around the world. What can you do? Well, before we discuss some of the things that may be contributing to that, I want you to meet a special guest that I have with me, and he's going to tell us some things about how people can actually grow their food and survive in a way. Adam Turtle, it's good to have you join us.
Thank you, Larry. Sorry.
And we're down in Summertown, Tennessee, and the place you have here is?
Earth Advocates Research Farm. We try to do the research that the land-grant universities used to do before they started servicing the commercial interest and forgetting the small farmers.
All right, and this is actually, you're developing ways that people can actually grow their own food, and even if there were worldwide food shortages, people could still have adequate food to feed their families.
Right. Those that are old enough would probably remember the Victory Gardens from World War II, where everyone tried to feed themselves because the food was needed for the troops. Well, that really hasn't changed. And now we eat peaches in January. We eat tomatoes in the wintertime. We're shipping things from all over the place, and we're using more fuel. We're creating problems, and if something is happening in another country, we don't have any say-so on it. If we know a farmer is a bad farmer here, we can boycott him. And that'll help put force on him to change his ways. If it's a farmer in Venezuela or Costa Rica or China or wherever, we don't have any handle at all on them. So they can raise it any way they want to. They can be abusive to the soil, they can be abusive to their workers. They're not concerned with our safety or well-being, they're just concerned with the money. If we raise our food at home, we have some say-so. But it means no tomatoes in the wintertime.
Eating for the season is what we're talking about.
Eating seasonally, eating locally. There's an excellent new book out by Barbara Kingsolver, the famous fiction writer. She and her family undertook to eat for 1 year on food produced within a 100-mile radius of their farm, and they produced as much of their own as they could. Her book is called Animal Vegetable Miracle, and I highly recommend it. It's very readable, it's informative, it's inspiring. It's a good book.
Let's talk about some of the things that you're doing here. You're raising a lot of food in a small amount of space comparatively, okay? You have some special beds here. You have different varieties of plants. What are some of the things that you're doing, some things that maybe back from the past, some current things that you've experimented with? Point out a few things to us.
Well, if we turn around right over here, there's an asparagus bed. And if you look closely, you'll see there's about 4 inches of horse manure on top of it.
Well, let's walk over there and take a look at that.
This is plain old manure.
Did you say horse manure?
Horse manure.
Yeah, they say doesn't often make the best manure, though, does it?
Horse manure for asparagus is considered one of the very best.
It is.
And generally, it's top-dressed in the wintertime so that it has time to decompose somewhat before the asparagus spears come up.
So people have lots of horse manure, works great for asparagus.
Well, as you know, Larry, I don't have a horse.
Okay.
But there was a horse out in the field for a couple of weeks, just had wandered by. So every day we'd go out with a bucket and follow along behind.
And get the horse stuff.
And here we are. So people that don't keep livestock, which is most people now, can still find a pasture with horses or cattle and get the farmer's permission and go in there and collect it and use it for fertility. Otherwise, they get to buy commercial fertilizer, which is largely made from petroleum, the price of which, as everybody knows, is going up.
Well, I know that Susan's standing by, and she's looking forward to eating some of this great asparagus that's been grown in this horse manure. So let's go to Susan.
And I'm also really hungry, and this asparagus looks really good.
Okay, let's see, can we get you a piece? And then I've got a little joke to go with it. Okay, that's about as fresh as you can get. A lot of viewers may remember there used to be a country song out. The opening lines was, "There's only 2 things that money can't buy, and that's true love and homegrown tomatoes." Well, homegrown asparagus also.
Okay, ready?
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
And I don't even see any bugs out here.
There are very few. We practice what's called integrated pest management. If we have problem bugs, we find cultural ways of dealing with it. We don't use poisons because this is not my planet. It's just my garden. So we try to use it in a way that's in harmony with the rest of creation. Eat your asparagus.
Oh my God, that is just tender.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow, that is
Yes, ma'am.
fantastic.
And I said I had a little joke to go with this. There's an old story. A farmer is driving a load of manure down the road. This is back in horse and buggy days or horse and wagon days. And he's got this load of manure on his wagon. He's driving down the road. And he passes the mental hospital, which, of course, has a high fence around it. And there's an inmate just inside the fence. And he's looking out, watching the world. And when the farmer goes by, he asks him, he says, "Hey, what you got there?" And the farmer says, I got horse manure. He said, "Well, what you going to do with horse manure?" And the farmer said, "Well, we're going to put it on the strawberries." And the crazy man said, "You ought to be in here. We get milk and sugar on ours."
Adam, my gosh, this is the best asparagus I've ever had in my life.
Why would it not be?
I don't know, but
Got horse manure on it.
yeah, maybe that's what's wrong. I'm going to start growing this stuff now that you've taught me how to grow asparagus. Well, anyway, tell me how to grow asparagus here.
Okay, first off, if you're going to buy your asparagus, mail order or at your local garden store, you're going to get it as 1-year-old crowns. They're going to look kind of shriveled up and all. But when you plant them, they'll plump up, and the first year they'll make skinny little shoots. And you shouldn't harvest any of them because the plant needs to build up some energy. In the second year, you can harvest a few, but you stop harvesting. What my grandmother taught me was you stop harvesting when the new shoots are about the size of your pinky.
Okay.
You let the plant build up energy. Then the following year, you can harvest everything that's bigger than your pinky to let it build up. In about the third year, the asparagus comes into full bearing. Meantime, you've planted it the first year. The second year, you top dress it with 3 or 4 inches of manure in the wintertime. And each year thereafter. So over time, the asparagus is going to end up much deeper in the ground, which will help it avoid premature initiation of shoots in the springtime, and it'll give it more energy. So it'll put up bigger and bigger spears. And I guess while we're on it, there are 3 different ways of managing asparagus. The traditional way is harvest in the springtime as soon as it starts breaking ground, and you eat them. That's
Like
what you
what we
just
just
had.
did.
Right. The other one of the others, is to not harvest in the spring. Let it immediately go to ferns. You can swing the camera over, Larry, and you'll see that they're starting to go to ferns. And asparagus, by the way, are very, very ornamental. My grandmother grew her asparagus at the back of the flower bed, and then the ferns then served as a backdrop when the flowers came on, and it was beautiful, and it made a lot of food. So if you harvest in the spring, then you have to leave it alone all summer to restock the energy. If you use the fall technique, you leave it alone in the spring, and then about the 1st of August or so, you cut it all to the ground, and then you eat everything that comes up until it stops in the fall. Or if you're a farmer, that puts you in competition with the fall asparagus, which is usually around $4 a pound in the grocery store. And you got very little competition other than what's air freighted in from the southern hemisphere. There's a third technique developed by permaculture where you leave your biggest early spear, you just stake it and tie it off, and that one feeds the crown, and you eat everything for the whole rest of the season that comes on. So you get asparagus in the spring, in the summer, and in the fall, but you leave that one biggest spear to photosynthesize and put energy into the crown.
You have just given me a heck of a lesson, and I didn't have to read a book. Where have you learned all of this about the asparagus so in depth?
Nearly 70 years of caring, paying attention, and remembering. It's not that complex, but if folks are all caught up in their mortgage and the crime problems and the world food shortages and homeless folks and such, then it's difficult to focus on what's really important, which is being a steward of the earth. I take care of the garden, and the garden takes care of me. It's what's called a symbiotic relationship. A symbiotic relationship implies mutual contributions. We seem to have gone more and more to one-way relationships, and we can't continue. We cannot. We need to go back to tending and dressing the earth, taking care of each other. So many biblical scriptures come to me immediately, one of them being, what profit hath a man if in gaining the whole world it cost him his soul? Well, I think maybe that is what is happening. We're sacrificing the soul of our country and our society for a few dollars, for a few gallons of oil, for some winter cantaloupe.
Would you say it's all about I?
I think a lot of it is the so-called me generation, but I think the me generation was based on fear. People feel alienated. They no longer feel part of a community because we don't really have communities much anymore. And once a person is isolated, then taking care of themselves is what they have to do because they're not part of something. If we choose to rejoin creation, we're no longer alienated. That's what I did. I guess maybe it was a leap of faith, but it's one that I highly recommend for anyone who wants to get out of the rat race, who wants to get out of the prevailing insanity and return to true values. In permaculture, we have a slogan: take care of the people, take care of the planet, give away the surplus. Well, the Mennonites have a concept: enough is sufficient. We've forgotten that. More is never enough. We got to go back to sharing, because sharing is what you do with your surpluses. You don't hoard them, you share them. And I'm here to tell you, there is nothing in this world more fun than sharing.
That's right.
You got to eat the asparagus spear. I got to share it. And you know what? It was a good spear.
It was. It was phenomenal.
Adam, here we are, late April, getting into early May. These are all covered up. What do we have here?
These are our early potatoes. This is one called Rose Gold. It's one, we raised it last year. We liked it real well, so we saved back seed potatoes for it. And I took a chance and planted them early. But now we're having a late frost. We were at 30 degrees this morning at daybreak. So we put, this is called Remay. It's a frost protecting blanket.
So we have, you covered it up down here, and you have your potatoes underneath there, don't you?
Right. And notice no blackening. They weren't harmed at all. You'll also notice they're hilled up. Potatoes make on top of the seed piece. So the deeper you can end up with the seed piece, the more capacity you have for more potatoes.
Now, potatoes are a real staple during this time of, we hear food shortages and the like.
Right. We're still eating potatoes from last year. We're still eating winter squash from last year. We've finished our sweet potatoes, but I've got the new ones bedded down, and we'll plant them in about 3 weeks. We grew a lot of dry beans. We're still eating them from last year. With a little planting, it's not that hard to have food year-round, but you won't have the diversity you have in the high season. In January you don't have the roses you have in June.
Now, you were earlier talking to Susan about sharing. The greed and the self-centeredness, how's that contributing today? The greed of these speculators, how's that contributing these food shortages, food riots, and hunger, and even starvation around the world because of the greed of a few?
This is, again, that sense of alienation. I won't get enough if I don't get all I can. The Lord's taken care of me all my life. Why would I lose faith now and say, oh, I'm going to go hungry if I don't do this?
What about rich speculators? How are they contributing to this?
That's predatory behavior. We used to call them war profiteers. We need another Roosevelt. We need another New Deal. We can't continue with this deregulation, which allows the well, they used to be called robber barons, and I
Yeah.
think it's a good term. We can't be allowing the robber barons to impoverish the country. They've already ruined our reputation. They're in the process of sacking our economy. We can't continue this. Somehow we've got to reinstitute some sort of societal controls and societal norm. But first, we've got to come back together as a society.
Now,
And-
Howard Zinn, in a book on imperialization of American, in the history of America's imperialistic conquests, how is this contributing to some of the worldwide problems, whether it's food shortages or some of the, oil problems, wars?
Well, in a sense, it's driving them, because now the rich folks are able to collaborate. It doesn't require that they sit down in a back room and smoke cigars and have a conference to create a conspiracy with parallel interest. They just tend to work that way, so that, as the saying is, the rich get richer.
But the unbelievable suffering that's taking place around the world right now, 100 million additional people being thrust into poverty as speculators try to hoard food, the destruction, bombs that are being set off in Iraq being felt in America with the devastation of social programs we can no longer afford to help our senior citizens, the little children, the hurting, the homeless. Something's wrong around this world. It's called sin.
That's right. That's right. And we've gotten our priorities messed up.
Yeah.
We think it's me first. If America continues on this path, we will be damned.
People don't want to hear that, though. They'd
No.
rather say, God bless America, bless our greed, self-centeredness.
Okay, it's time for the hat. Veterans for Peace, very important organization. What's the top button say?
God forgive America.
And how many times do you reckon God's already forgiven America? Even God might have a limit to patience. If we look back to the history of the Israelites, didn't God find it necessary periodically to chastise them for ungodly behavior?
Well, aren't we somehow imploding rather than exploding as a nation? Our own greed consuming us, the obesity problems, the foods that we're eating that are poisoning us because we've gotten away from the garden. As far as the oil crisis is concerned, we've become totally addicted to the very terrorist groups that funding them, and we need their oil. It just seems like somehow we're adding to our own self-destruction with our self-centeredness as a nation.
You're right. We're in what could be termed a downward spiral. And we're getting more and more frightened, more and more frantic, and paying less and less attention and being less and less intelligent, and we're relying on direction from the top. I'm afraid our government has sold us out to corporate interest, and now it's up to the people to take care of each other, as were commanded in the beginning. That hasn't changed.
Community gardens, victory gardens, independence through renewable energy, biofuels that are made the individual, not big corporate biofuels that take the corn that the people could be eating and making ethanol and making big profits for people. We're talking about people making their own fuels and discovering energy independence and freedom, something that big money interests don't really want to happen.
Well, I wonder if we can really afford the concept of the corporation, because a corporation is given legal status as an entity, but without responsibility.
But there's no mentioning or protection of the corporation in the Constitution, and yet the corporation has so much power.
That's correct. That's correct. And Roosevelt noticed this and created the New Deal and put a lot of empowerment into people's hands. He created the antitrust laws, a lot of these things. But the corporate powers have slowly been nibbling at them. And of course, the Republican Party is saying we want smaller government. What they mean is they want less government regulation interfering with robber barons' profits.
Well, that being said, let's continue to take a look at some of the plants that you got growing out here, okay?
All right. In the wintertime, like a lot of Americans, we get the mail order nursery catalogs, and we look through them and we drool and we circle $50,000 worth of stuff, and mostly they just go over in a stack, and we've had our fun, a no money shopping spree, and it's over. But we also look for things that especially have some appeal, because we're still experimenting, we're still trying to develop what's going to work well here and what do we like. So one of the potatoes I read about last winter was called le rat, which is French for the rat.
Okay.
And apparently the name comes from the fact that around the mother potato, the piece you put in the ground, the new potatoes form in a ring around them, kind of like a bunch of baby suckling rats.
Okay.
And they're about the size of a rat. So big around, so long, and considered one of the very best potatoes in terms of flavor and texture by the French, who know a little bit about food. So we decided to try them. So this is my planting of le rat. As I remember, there's 27 pieces there, and I had 3 left over, which I put in the other bed here. When they came up, we planted them, about 2 inches down. When they came up, I hilled up dirt around them. This is the 3rd hilling now. Now I'm using rotted leaves that we harvested last fall. And the potatoes are all hilled up. We put a blanket over them last night to give them some frost protection. The frost is over, the sun's up, and it's burned off, so now we take the blanket off, and here are the plants. We probably, other than an occasional weeding or watering if we get a bad dry spell, won't have to do anything until fall. When the potato tops start dying down, then we'll go in with a digging fork and we'll harvest all the potatoes. To keep potatoes, a secret shown to me by an old mountain man in East Tennessee, we sprinkle wood ashes over them. We lay them out on a piece of newspaper in the mudroom at the house, and we sprinkle wood ashes over them, or you can use pickling lime. It interferes with some fungal diseases that get on curing potatoes. So you get more potatoes stay in good condition longer than with other techniques. And we're just finishing up the potatoes from last year's garden, and we'll be able to get what's called new potatoes in about 6 more weeks. And for new potatoes, bring the camera down here. Now, if this is assuming it's now late summer, the foliage is way up here, but I can go in here and just dig a little hole and reach in and find the new potatoes in there and pull them out.
Now, I had one question that was just, you said you didn't have to water this all summer long.
Well, if we have a summer like last year, I will have to.
Okay.
In a normal summer, I wouldn't.
Why?
Because the the moisture holding quality of my soil has been enhanced by lots of organic matter. Once the potatoes are harvested here, we'll turn this bed so all of these rotted leaves will be incorporated into the soil and will enhance its moisture holding ability.
Wow. It's just amazing, this dirt. Look at this.
And I say you're not even at dirt yet. This is just
This is
the
the
rotted leaves. Here's the dirt, but it's not that different.
Unbelievable. Oh, that is rich. How old would you say this bed is, or all this dirt compost?
We made this bed in, I think in November last year.
Very porous.
Well, we keep it that way. The reason for the raised beds is we hand make our dirt. We mix sifted topsoil with rotted leaves and finished compost, and we turn that all up and put it in the bed, and then we never walk in the bed, so nothing packs it down. And we keep a mulch on it so not even the rain is pounding on it and the sun doesn't bake it, etc. So the soil stays in good tilth.
Tell people why is the soil preparation so important?
Well, we're on a dry oak hickory ridge. It's a very rocky, hard soil. It would be very difficult, very challenging to garden in it. By going to the raised beds, I've got more control and I can create the kinds of soil necessary for the different plants.
But tell them why it's so important to have, your compost, your manure. I put sand in mine. I try to keep it as porous as possible for those roots to be able to get a real good start down into the ground.
Yeah, loose root run is very important. With the camera, you can shoot the bed behind us here, Larry. You see the crimson clover. Now that will turn in soon. We haven't yet. This bed here right next to us, this one, We chopped all the clover out last week, chopped it up with a hoe. You can see we've added some wood ashes on it. Now we'll come back, we'll turn it up a little bit, and that'll be ready to plant. And by doing this, we're continually improving the soil. And of course, you feed the soil feeds you, and you create one of those symbiotic loops.
Now you're talking about clover. What do you do with this clover? We always fed it to our horses and cows.
Okay, crimson clover is what's known as a winter annual. You plant it in September or October. It germinates and makes a low growth during the winter, and then as soon as the sun starts warming things in the spring, it jumps up to knee-high or so and creates a lot more growth. Well, all clovers are colonized by nitrogen-fixing bacteria on the roots. Those bacteria take nitrogen from the atmosphere and fix it in a form that the plants can use. So they're contributing to the fertility. Well, it's either that, these old ways, the so-called old-fashioned ways, or petroleum products. Well, we don't have control of the petroleum. We don't have control of the shipping. We don't have control of the source. We certainly don't have control of the price. And because of a lot of frivolous use, we're starting to run short. We've got to stop with frivolous use and only use it where it's really valid.
So in other words, you planted this clover, and it's like a fertilizer, a natural. Is that true?
It's called green manure. There are a lot of plants used that way. Austrian peas can be used that way, vetch can be used that way, clovers, even wheat and rye and stuff can be turned down. Years ago we knew this. The Amish still know it. But now our new machines that do the harvesting take everything. And pretty soon we've ruined the soil. What we're doing with chemical agriculture is we're mining the soil. And the mine is getting deeper and deeper, and the price of what we're getting out of the soil is getting more and more expensive because it requires more and more effort. This kind of gardening becomes easier and easier and easier with time because you create a good condition and then you maintain it. For me, it's part of my religion. Taking care of the soil is part of what I'm supposed to do. My name is Adam, and if you go to a dictionary, there are several interpretations. One of them is of the earth. That's what the word means. Well, I take it personally, and I take it seriously. So I am of the earth, which implies I have a responsibility to the earth. Well, if I maintain my filial responsibility, if you will, to my mother, the earth, I have to take care of her. Then she's going to take care of me. And we, hopefully, will have some surplus that we can share with you, with neighbors, with friends. It's an awful lot of fun when your garden starts coming in and you've got extra stuff to go knock on a neighbor's door and say, I had a little extra, could you use some? And there's always the rescue missions, the food banks, etc. The Garden Writers Association of America, I'm a member, started a thing 7-8 years ago. I think maybe it was Rosalind Creasy that started it, called Plant a Row for the Hungry, where gardeners are encouraged to put in a little bit extra in their gardens, and then when the produce comes in, to take it to a food bank, to share it.
That was Adam Turtle with Earth Advocates Research Farm here in Summertown, Tennessee, just giving you a few pointers on what you can do. Don't panic, pray, and use your God-given talents. Have a garden, just one of many ways. So this doesn't need to be a time of panic, but instead a time for us to return to the earth, to be earth keepers, not earth breakers. I'm Larry Rice, and this has been Here's Help, and we welcome your input. Feel free to write us at P.O. Box 473 in St. Louis, Missouri, as we continue to look at what does it mean to be an earth keeper, not an earth breaker.